I want to bring in the ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Smith. Welcome back, Congressman. I mean, President Xi drawing a red line on Taiwan. No word yet from this administration on this point of contention. Are you concerned?
Yes, I am concerned. I mean, look, to some degree, President Xi hasn't said anything that hasn't been China's position for a long time. And we have a pretty simple, straightforward policy with China. One China. We recognize that Taiwan and China are one country. But second, and crucially, no reunification by force. And we reserve the right to help Taiwan defend themselves by help Taiwan be a deterrence to this by helping provide them with weapons. That's long been the policy. And I was in China last September. I had these conversations with senior Chinese officials. They are concerned that Taiwan will push for independence. I don't see any evidence that Taiwan is actually doing that. So if we can maintain the status quo, that's the best for keeping peace and stability in the region and allowing Taiwan to continue to be Taiwan.
Well, the administration says that China is working or will work behind the scenes to help end the war in Iran, including a commitment by President Xi to not supply Iran with weapons. Listen, Congressman.
He said he's not going to give military equipment. That's a big statement.
I think they're going to do what they can. And here, China has a much bigger interest in reopening the strait than the U.S. does.
Do you take the administration at their word? Are you confident that China will not help arm Iran?
Yes, several important points here to separate. One, no, I do not take the administration at its word. Trump has said very little truthful about what's going on with the war in Iran on a number of levels. He keeps claiming that Iran is ready for a deal, and that's absolutely not the case. So no, do not take Trump at his word about what China said. Second, don't take China at their word. I don't trust that China is going to tell President Trump the truth about that. Third, it's really not true that China is the one that's in a weaker position because the strait is shut down. It is true that they are more dependent on oil coming out of the Middle East, but they also have other options. And they're not the ones who are bogged down in the war and the conflict with Iran. So counting on China to help us because they are hurting more because of this war just isn't true. It's going to be a lot more complicated than that. The best thing that we can hope for is to try to stop China from giving any direct material support to Iran. Thus far, it does not appear that they have done that, but they are certainly flirting with the idea, and there is a risk. Because understand the big picture here. China wants us to be weaker. Iran is helping make us weaker. They're not that anxious to stop that situation. It's on us to figure out a diplomatic way out of the war that Trump dragged us into in what was a colossal blunder.
Congressman, I just want to revisit one issue in terms of, obviously, the huge elephant in the room being Taiwan as a potential either deal breaker or maker or point of leverage. One of the things you said was to describe our policy that we recognize one China as Taiwan being a part of China. There is obviously some pushback to that notion of what our policy really is. We recognize ever since, obviously, they are an independent island in many ways. Can you just describe a little bit why, not independent, but can you describe a little bit about what you think the policy holdup might be in terms of how Trump is relaying or might be presenting that to the president of China?
Well, I think that the holdup, and I know this because I've spoken with the Chinese ambassador on a number of occasions, people in China. China's claim is that Taiwan is pushing towards independence. They don't trust the current president of Taiwan and his party. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's accurate. I do think China is legitimately worried about that. They want to maintain the status quo, but then there's also the risk that President Xi decides that it's his legacy to bring Taiwan officially into the fold and to force that issue. What we have to do diplomatically, and by the way, our ambassador, David Perdue, I met with him over several days in China. He's doing a great job. He understands this. Our role is to keep the status quo. Don't generate a conflict between China and Taiwan. And again, the policy is simple. One China, two systems, no forced reunification. Taiwan does have a right to be armed to defend themselves, no independence. So if we could keep that message, that can calm down the Taiwan issue. But we haven't even talked about the economic issues, which is what we really hope Trump to negotiate. And it's not just a matter of China buying some Boeing airplanes. That's fine. It's the tariffs. It's what China's doing to block our ability to get other access to rare earth minerals from other countries or in our own. Those trade issues, that's really what I hope they're having some conversations about in these private discussions, because that economic relationship is crucial, and it is in a very contentious place right now.
I want to put a pin in that for a moment and ask you about the concerns that Democrats have raised over the Trump family business deals. I mean, the Trumps have reported owning dozens of trademarks in China. A company linked to Eric Trump reportedly trying to reach a deal with a Chinese chip maker for a data center during this very trip. Republicans on the Hill seem to be brushing this off. Will there be any accountability or at least questions raised?
We will push for that on the Democratic side, but from the Republican majority, no. Look, they've let Trump get away with an unprecedented level of corruption. I mean, starting with him raffling off access to the White House if people will buy his Bitcoin, to all kinds of family deals with countries all around the world that are clear conflicts of interest, with President Trump looking after the interests of the United States of America as he's supposed to do as president. Yeah, there is an unprecedented level of corruption in the Trump administration. We're going to push for it as Democrats to try to at least get those questions answered and to have some accountability. Republicans in Congress seem perfectly willing to just turn a blind eye to absolutely everything that Trump is doing. We're going to keep pressing them to actually look out for the American people instead of just covering for Trump.
Congressman Adam Smith, thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
I want to quickly go back to my panel for just one